The laughter started at exactly 4:47 p.m. on a Friday afternoon in December. Garrett Sullivan heard it before he saw it, that sharp cutting sound that slices through a man's chest like broken glass. He was pushing his mop bucket across the marble lobby of Brennan Aerospace Technologies when the first wave hit him, rolling in from the parking lot through the glass doors that separated the billionaires from the invisible. He didn't need to look up to know what they were laughing at. He already knew. His car, his 1973 Ford Mustang, the one with rust spreading across the hood like a disease. The one with the passenger door that didn't close right. The one that looked like it belonged in a junkyard, not in the parking lot of a $4 billion aerospace company. Garrett kept mopping. He'd learned a long time ago that the best way to survive was to stay invisible. Keep your head down, do your job, don't give them anything to remember. But today they weren't going to let him disappear. The voice belonged to Brad Hutchinson, Vice President of Operations. 44 years old, Harvard MBA, drove a Tesla Model S Plaid that cost more than Garrett made in 4 years. Brad was the kind of man who measured his worth by the size of his office and the fear in other people's eyes. Garrett stopped mopping. "Come outside for a second." Brad's voice carried that particular tone of superiority that rich men use when they want to remind you of your place. "Natalie wants to see something." Natalie Brennan, the CEO, the woman who owned everything, the building, the company, the patents, the future. The woman who had never once looked Garrett in the eye in the 3 years and 11 months he'd worked here. Garrett felt something cold settle in his stomach. He needed to finish the lobby floor. The ammonia solution was already drying in streaks. "The floor can wait." Brad's smile didn't reach his eyes, didn't even try. "This is important." Garrett leaned his mop against the wall and followed Brad through the glass doors into the California afternoon sun. December in Palo Alto meant 62 degrees and cloudless skies, the kind of weather that made rich people believe they deserved their fortunes. The parking lot was crowded. At least 60 employees had gathered in a loose semicircle, and at the center of it all stood Natalie Brennan. She was 43 years old and looked younger. Auburn hair pulled back so tight it could cut designer suit that probably cost more than a semester at Stanford. She held a wireless microphone in one hand and a champagne flute in the other. "Ah, there he is." Natalie's voice carried across the lot, amplified by the speaker system someone had set up. "Our guest of honor." Garrett stopped walking. Every eye in the crowd turned toward him. 60 executives in $2,000 suits, all looking at the man in gray coveralls with oil stains under his fingernails. "Come on, don't be shy." Don't." Natalie gestured him forward with the champagne glass, the crystal catching sunlight like a weapon. "We're doing our quarterly innovation showcase. You know the drill. Everyone shows off their new rides, talks about the future of transportation, and I thought, why not include everyone, even our support staff?" Laughter rippled through the crowd like a contagion. Garrett didn't move. 4 years. 4 years of mopping floors and emptying trash cans and cleaning toilets that executives couldn't be bothered to flush. 4 years of being invisible. And now this woman who had never learned his name, who walked past him every day like he was a piece of furniture, was putting him on display like a circus animal. "That is your car, isn't it?" Natalie pointed at the Mustang parked in the far corner of the lot, isolated from the Teslas and Porsches like a leper. "The, vintage model." More laughter. Louder this time. Someone shouted about salvage yards. Someone else mentioned time machines. Garrett felt his jaw tighten. He thought about Kate. He thought about the night she died, holding his hand in that hospital room, her voice barely a whisper against the machines that couldn't save her. "Don't let them bury it, Garrett. Don't let them win." He thought about the engine hidden beneath that rusted hood. The engine she'd helped him build. The engine that could change everything. And something shifted inside him. Something that had been locked away for 14 years, buried under grief and shame and the weight of broken promises. "You want to see if it runs?" The laughter stuttered to a halt. Natalie raised an eyebrow, surprised that the furniture had spoken. Excuse me, Garrett started walking toward the Mustang. You want to see if my car runs? I'll show you. The crowd parted like water around a stone. He could feel their eyes on his back, could hear the whispers starting up. What's he doing? Is he serious? This should be good. He reached the Mustang and put his hand on the door handle. The metal was warm from the afternoon sun, familiar, comforting. Like touching Kate's hand. Like coming home to something that didn't exist anymore. Sullivan. Brad's voice carried a warning now, uncertainty creeping in at the edges. Maybe you should just... Garrett opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. The interior smelled like old leather and motor oil and something else. Something that only Garrett could identify. Chanel No. 5. Kate's perfume. Faint now, almost gone, but still there. Still with him after all these years. He put his hands on the steering wheel and closed his eyes. I'm sorry. The words were so quiet, even he barely heard them. I tried to stay invisible, Kate, but they won't let me. Then he turned the key. The engine didn't sputter. It didn't cough. It didn't wheeze or groan or make any of the sounds you'd expect from a 51-year-old car with rust on its hood and a maintenance worker who couldn't afford proper repairs. Instead, it sang. A deep, smooth, powerful harmonic that rolled across the parking lot like thunder. The sound was unlike anything the crowd had ever heard. Not from a car, not from a plane, not from any machine ever built by human hands. It was pure, perfect, alive, like an orchestra made of metal and physics and something that shouldn't be possible. The laughter stopped. Every single person in that parking lot went silent. Garrett revved the engine once, twice, 3 times. Each time that impossible sound filled the air, vibrating in their chests, making their teeth hum. Making them question everything they thought they knew about thermodynamics and energy conservation, and the laws that governed the universe. Natalie's champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the asphalt. Garrett killed the engine, stepped out of the car, and walked back toward the building without looking at anyone. His heart was hammering in his chest, adrenaline making his hands shake, but his face remained calm, expressionless. The mask he'd worn for 4 years holding firm for a few more seconds. Wait. Natalie's voice had lost its mockery, stripped down to something raw and confused. Wait, what was that? What kind of engine? But Garrett was already gone, disappearing through the glass doors, returning to his mop and his bucket and his invisibility. Behind him, the crowd stood frozen, staring at the rusted Mustang like they'd just witnessed a miracle, because they had. They just didn't know it yet. Natalie couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her penthouse bedroom 37 floors above San Francisco, staring at the ceiling and listening to that sound replay in her mind. That engine. That impossible engine. She'd been around cars her whole life. Her father had built Brennan Aerospace from a small auto parts manufacturer into a global aerospace giant. She'd grown up in garages and factories, surrounded by the smell of gasoline and the roar of combustion engines. She knew what machines sounded like. And that sound, that smooth, perfect, almost musical sound, was not something any machine should be able to make. She reached for her phone. 2:14 in the morning, according to the glowing numbers. Too late to call anyone. Too early to pretend she'd get any sleep. Brad, I need you in my office tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, his voice thick with sleep and confusion. Natalie, it's 2 in the morning. I need everything you can find on Garrett Sullivan. Employment history, background check. I want to know where he came from, where he worked before, what he did before he started pushing a mop around my building. Silence on the other end. Then that janitor. You want me to investigate the janitor? Did you hear that engine today? Yeah, it was different, I guess. Old car probably has some custom work. Different. Natalie sat up in bed, her voice sharp enough to cut through Brad's drowsiness. Brad, I've heard engines from Ferrari, from Lamborghini, from military jets that can break the sound barrier. I've never heard anything like that. Not once. Not ever. She could hear Brad breathing on the other end of the line, processing, probably wondering if his boss had finally cracked under the pressure of running a $4 billion company. 6 a.m., she repeated. Don't be late. She hung up and lay back down, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Garrett Sullivan's face as he walked back into the building. No triumph, no satisfaction, no revenge, just sadness. Like a man carrying a weight too heavy to bear. Her penthouse was too quiet. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed San Francisco spread out below her like a kingdom she ruled but didn't inhabit. The Italian marble floors, the $50,000 desk, the sub-zero refrigerator that contained nothing but champagne and pre-made salads, all of it suddenly felt hollow. On the wall across from her bed hung a single photograph. Her father, Robert Brennan, shaking hands with the president. That was it. No family photos, no vacation snapshots, no evidence that Natalie had a life outside these walls. She got up and walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cold glass. Somewhere out there in a studio apartment that probably cost $950 a month, Garrett Sullivan was sleeping. Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was lying awake too, thinking about that engine, about whatever secret he was hiding under the hood of that rusted car. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. She'd been 8 years old, standing in the garage while he worked on his Jaguar. "Daddy, why is your car so loud?" Robert Brennan had knelt down eye level with his daughter, smiling that rare smile he saved for moments when he was teaching her something important. "Because power makes noise, princess. Real strength always announces itself. Never trust silence. Silence means weakness." But he'd been wrong. Sullivan's engine hadn't announced anything. It had whispered something profound, something that made Natalie's chest tighten with a feeling she couldn't name. She grabbed her phone again and started searching. Garrett Sullivan, Brennan Aerospace, NASA, engine design. The searches led nowhere, just dead ends and irrelevant results. Whoever Garrett Sullivan was, he'd done a remarkable job of erasing himself from the internet, which only made Natalie more certain that there was something to find. Brad was waiting in her office at 5:45 the next morning. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes. Hair not quite as perfectly styled as usual, holding a venti Starbucks like it was life support. "You look like hell," Natalie said, pouring herself espresso from the $8,000 machine in the corner. "Thanks, so do you." They stared at each other for a moment, and despite everything, Natalie almost smiled. Almost. Brad dropped a thin folder on her desk. "That's everything I could find, which isn't much." Natalie picked up the folder and started reading. The first page was Sullivan's employment application from January 2021. She scanned the basic information: name, address, social security number. Then she reached the education section. High school dropout. No college degree. Previous employment listed as warehouse work and odd jobs. She looked up at Brad. "This is what he gave us. That's what HR has on file. But keep reading." She flipped to the next page. Brad had done more than pull the employee file. He'd run a proper background check, the kind you do when you're investigating corporate espionage, not hiring a maintenance worker. Her eyes widened as she read. Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from MIT. Grade point average 3.9. Master of Science in Aerospace Engineering from Stanford, 4.0. 12 years at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. Senior Propulsion Systems Engineer. 14 peer-reviewed publications. 3 NASA awards. Natalie's hands started to shake. "Wait." She looked up at Brad, who was watching her carefully. MIT, Stanford, 12 years at NASA. "It gets better." Brad leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely unsettled. After Stanford, he spent 12 years at NASA working on propulsion systems for deep space missions. Published papers, won awards. The guy was a rising star. Natalie felt something cold creep up her spine. "Then what the hell is he doing mopping my floors? That's where it gets weird." Brad pointed at the folder. "About 15 years ago, he just disappears. Leaves NASA, drops off the grid completely. No publications, no patents, no employment records, nothing. Then 4 years ago he shows up here, applies for a janitor position with a fake resume that lists him as a high school dropout with no work experience. Natalie stared at the documents. A NASA engineer, a propulsion specialist, hiding in her building for 4 years, mopping floors and emptying trash. Why? There's one more thing. Brad's voice was quiet now, careful. I found an old news article from 15 years ago, right before Sullivan disappeared from NASA. He handed her a printout. The headline read, "Aerospace Engineer's Wife Loses Battle with Cancer." Below it, a photograph. Garrett Sullivan, younger, thinner, his eyes hollow with grief, standing beside a woman in a hospital bed. The woman was smiling despite the tubes in her arms, despite the shadows under her eyes and the scarf wrapped around what was obviously a bald head. Her name, according to the caption, was Dr. Catherine Sullivan. Kate. She was 42 years old. Natalie read the article 3 times. Catherine Sullivan had been an engineer too, worked at NASA alongside her husband. They'd been collaborating on what the article vaguely described as a revolutionary energy recycling engine. No details, no follow-up, no patents filed. Just a mention buried in an obituary that 2 brilliant engineers had been working on something that sounded like science fiction. And then Kate died, and Garrett disappeared, and the revolutionary engine vanished into nothing. Natalie set down the article and looked at Brad. I want surveillance footage. Every camera in the parking lot. I want to see what he does with that car when no one's watching. Brad hesitated. Natalie, that's a bit. Do it. Her voice left no room for argument. End of day, everything you have. After Brad left, Natalie sat alone in her office staring at the photograph of Kate Sullivan. The woman was dying, clearly in pain, but she was smiling. Actually smiling, like she knew something the rest of the world didn't. What did you build? Natalie whispered to the empty room. What did you and Garrett create? The footage arrived at 6 p.m. Natalie locked her office door, turned off her phone, and settled in to watch 3 weeks of security camera recordings. The first video showed Garrett arriving at work at 5:30 in the morning, parking the Mustang in the same four-corner spot, the same routine every single day. Nothing unusual. The second video showed him leaving at 11 p.m., 3 hours after his shift ended, but he didn't go straight to his car. Instead, he walked to the trunk, opened it, and pulled out a small toolbox. Natalie leaned closer to the screen. Garrett popped the hood of the Mustang and started working. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but she could see him adjusting components, connecting wires to some kind of handheld diagnostic device. This wasn't casual maintenance. This was engineering. Precise, methodical, professional. She fast-forwarded through 3 weeks of footage. Same pattern every night. Garrett stayed late, worked on his car for 2 or 3 hours, then drove home. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. He was just the janitor. Then she found it. In one clip from 11 days ago, Garrett disconnected something from the engine. Natalie paused, rewound, zoomed in as much as the grainy footage would allow. A fuel line. He'd disconnected the fuel line. Then he got in the car and started the engine. Natalie's hand flew to her mouth. The engine ran, with the fuel line disconnected with no gasoline flowing into the combustion chamber. The engine ran for 10 minutes before Garrett shut it down. Reconnected the line and drove away. She paused the video, rewound it, watched it again. An engine that runs without fuel, an engine that recycles its own energy, an engine that sounds like nothing else on Earth. Natalie stood up so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. She walked to the window, hands shaking, breathing too fast. Through the glass she could see the parking lot below the corner where Garrett's Mustang sat like a rusted secret. She pulled out her laptop and started searching. Revolutionary energy recycling engine, thermal regeneration, NASA propulsion systems. The searches led her down a rabbit hole of theoretical physics papers and government databases until she found it. A patent filing from 2008. Title: Thermal Regenerative Propulsion System with Closed-Loop Energy Recycling. Inventors Garrett Sullivan and Dr. Catherine Sullivan. Filing date March 15, 2008. Grant date June 22, 2009. And then at the bottom of the document, the detail that made Natalie's blood run cold. Assignee Brennan Aerospace Technologies. Assignment note acquired from original inventors pursuant to settlement agreement June 2009. Natalie read it again. Then again. The words didn't change. Her father's company. Her company had acquired the patent from Garrett and Kate Sullivan in June 2009, right after Kate was diagnosed with cancer, right before she died. The room tilted. Natalie grabbed the edge of her desk to steady herself. Her entire life, the company, the fortune, the legacy she'd spent 43 years trying to live up to was built on this. On a patent acquired from two desperate people who were watching cancer destroy everything they'd built together. She picked up her phone with trembling hands and dialed. The call rang 6 times before Vincent Aldrich answered, his voice groggy with sleep. "Natalie, do you know what time it is, Vincent?" She could barely get the words out. "I need to know about Garrett Sullivan." Silence on the other end. Long, heavy silence. "Tell me about Garrett Sullivan, Vincent." More silence. Then a long, weary sigh. "How much do you know?" "I know he worked at NASA. I know he had a wife who died. I know he developed a technology that someone stole from him 15 years ago." Natalie's voice was shaking now, cracking at the edges. "What I need to know is whether that someone was my father." The silence stretched into eternity. "Then I think you'd better come to my house. There are some files your father left with me. Files he never wanted you to see." Natalie was in her car before Vincent finished speaking. Vincent Aldrich lived in a mansion in Atherton, 20 minutes from the office, but a world away in terms of old money and established power. He'd known Natalie since she was a child, had bounced her on her knee at company picnics, had given the eulogy at her father's funeral 7 years ago. Now he stood at his front door at 10:45 at night, an old man in a bathrobe holding a manila folder that seemed to weigh more than the world. "Come in." His voice was tired in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour. "I made coffee. You'll need it." He led her to his study leather chairs, oak desk walls lined with books that had actually been read. On the desk sat the folder 2 inches thick, stuffed with papers that looked like they'd been handled many times over many years. "Your father was a complicated man." Vincent sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 71 years. Brilliant, ruthless, capable of great kindness and great cruelty sometimes in the same breath. Natalie couldn't bring herself to sit. She stood by the desk staring at the folder like it might explode. Did he steal the Prometheus engine? The name had been in the patent filing, buried in the technical specifications. Prometheus, named after the Greek titan who stole fire from the gods. Vincent picked up the folder, held it for a moment, then handed it to her. "Steal is a strong word, but yes, in essence, yes." Natalie opened the folder. Inside were documents, legal papers, patent applications, email chains, and a handwritten letter in her father's unmistakable script. She started reading. The first document was an email from Robert Brennan to his chief legal counsel dated May 12, 2009. "Jim Daniel and Catherine Sullivan approached us yesterday requesting $500,000 in funding. In exchange, they're offering 30% equity in their Prometheus engine technology. I've reviewed their preliminary patents. This is billion-dollar technology, thermal regenerative propulsion. If it works, and their proof of concept suggests it does, it will revolutionize the entire aerospace industry. But the Sullivans are naive. They need money desperately. Kate's cancer bills are crushing them. They're vulnerable. Strategy threaten IP violation lawsuits based on their NASA work. Drag out litigation. They can't afford lawyers, force a settlement, full patent assignment, zero compensation, airtight NDA. They'll never recover financially or professionally. Budget $2.5 million for legal fees. Projected ROI $2 to $5 billion over 20 years, Robert. Natalie's hands began to shake so badly she nearly dropped the papers. The next document was a legal memo from June 18, 2009. Settlement executed today. Daniel and Catherine Sullivan have signed full patent assignment. All Prometheus technology rights now belong to Brennan Aerospace. Compensation $0. 50-year NDA with $10 million penalty clause. Notes: Daniel Sullivan cried when he signed. Literal tears on the documents. Catherine Sullivan, very ill in wheelchair, refused to look at me. Her last words: "You're destroying something beautiful." They had no choice. Medical bills totaling $347,000 and mounting. Total bankruptcy. Cost to us $2.3 million in legal fees. Value acquired estimated $2 to $5 billion. Natalie walked to Vincent's bathroom and vomited. When she came back, face pale, hands still shaking. Vincent was holding a glass of water and a towel. He didn't say anything, just waited. She picked up the folder again, found the handwritten letter from Robert Brennan to Vincent Aldrich dated 2010. Frank Vincent. I know you disapprove, but business isn't about morality. It's about survival. The Sullivans came to me in desperation. Kate was dying. They needed money. I saw an opportunity. That's what makes a successful businessman. The ability to see opportunity where others see tragedy. Daniel has disappeared. Good. The less noise, the better. Kate's death in November was unfortunate timing, but honestly it removed a variable. She was the real genius. Daniel is talented, but Kate was visionary. We've had 20 engineers trying to reverse engineer Prometheus from the patents for 8 months. Built 47 prototypes, none of them work properly. The patents are incomplete. The Sullivans kept the critical components in their heads. Clever bastards. But it doesn't matter. At least they can't develop it with someone else. The technology is locked away, that's enough. Sometimes frank winning isn't about having everything, it's about making sure your enemies have nothing. Natalie read the letter 3 times. The handwriting was her father's. She'd seen it on birthday cards, on notes stuck to the refrigerator, on the will he'd left when he died. The same hand that had written "I love you, sweetheart" had also written "Your enemies have nothing." She looked up at Vincent, who was watching her with sad, tired eyes. He didn't just steal the technology. Her voice was barely a whisper. He destroyed them. While Kate was dying, while they were drowning in medical bills, he used that against them. Vincent nodded slowly. Yes. And then when she died, he called it unfortunate timing, like she was just an inconvenience, an obstacle. The tears came then, hot and bitter. Natalie didn't try to stop them. I spent my whole life trying to live up to his legacy, trying to prove I was worthy of the Brennan name. And it was all built on this, on destroying 2 good people while the wife was dying of cancer. Vincent stood and walked to his antique safe. He opened it with a combination Natalie couldn't see, then pulled out a second smaller envelope, sealed with wax. Your father wrote this 2 weeks before he died. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave him 3 months. He handed the envelope to Natalie, his hands shaking almost as badly as hers. He asked me to give this to you if you ever found out about the Sullivans. Quote, let her know who I really was. Natalie broke the seal and pulled out 3 handwritten pages. Her father's last confession. My dearest Natalie, if you're reading this, you've discovered what I did to Garrett Sullivan and his wife. Good. You deserve to know who your father truly was. I'm dying. 3 months left, and for the first time in 65 years, I'm afraid, not of death, of judgment, of meeting Catherine Sullivan wherever we go next. You want the truth? Here it is. I was a monster. The Sullivans came to me desperate. Kate was dying. Bills were crushing them. They had technology worth billions, but zero capital to develop it. They trusted me. Instead, I saw prey. I used lawyers to tear apart their lives, threatened to bankrupt them with IP litigation, drew out the process while medical bills drowned them. Then I offered a settlement, give me everything or lose everything. Daniel cried when he signed. Kate, in her wheelchair, bald from chemotherapy, weeks from death, looked at me and said, You're destroying something beautiful. I hope you can live with that. I could. And I did. Kate died 5 months later. Daniel disappeared. I built a $4 billion empire. But here's what nobody knows. I didn't stop at patent theft. After they signed the NDA, I made sure Garrett Sullivan never worked again, blacklisted him from every aerospace company, called personal contacts at Boeing, Lockheed, SpaceX, Blue Origin, flagged his name in industry databases as litigation risk, had lawyers send cease and desist letters to any company that interviewed him, monitored his bank accounts to ensure he stayed poor. Why? Because I was terrified. Terrified that if he rebuilt, if he found another partner, he'd expose what I'd done. So I destroyed his career. Permanently. Catherine Sullivan died hating me. Garrett Sullivan vanished. And I built my empire on their corpses. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I only want you to know who I was. Ruthless, paranoid, brilliant, and utterly, completely alone. Do you know why I never remarried after your mother left? Not because I loved her too much, because no one stays with a monster. Do you know why I worked 80-hour weeks, not dedication? Because going home meant facing silence. Do you know why I died alone in a hospital room with only Vincent beside me? Because that's what I deserved. Natalie, you can be different. You have a heart I never had, a conscience. Don't become me. Don't let this legacy bury you. If you meet Garrett Sullivan, and I think you will tell him I'm sorry. Tell him he won. Tell him Catherine's Prometheus engine deserves to see daylight. And if you can, my dearest daughter, fix what I destroyed. Be the person I could never be. I love you despite everything. Your father. P.S. I tried to develop Prometheus. 20 engineers, 8 years, 200 million invested. Every prototype failed because Garrett and Kate kept the critical components in their heads. The technology I stole worthless without them. I destroyed 2 lives for nothing. That's my legacy. Natalie finished reading. The letter fell from her hands, pages scattering across Vincent's Persian rug. He knew. Her voice was hollow, empty. He knew everything. And he still did it. Vincent knelt down slowly, gathering the pages. Your father died 7 years ago. He called for you at the end. The nurses said he kept asking where you were. I was in Tokyo. Business trip. Natalie's voice was mechanical now, shock settling in like frost. I didn't know he was dying. He didn't tell me. He didn't want you to see him weak. Vincent stood holding the pages carefully. His last words were, tell Natalie I'm sorry. For everything. Tell her to be better than me. Natalie looked at the old man who'd been her father's best friend for 42 years. The question came out before she could stop it. Why didn't you stop him, Vincent? You knew what he was doing. Vincent's face crumpled. Because I was a coward. I valued our friendship more than doing what was right. I've lived with that for 15 years, every single day. The room was silent except for the grandfather clock in the corner ticking away seconds that couldn't be taken back. What do I do now? Natalie whispered. Vincent walked to the window, looking out at the manicured lawn, the perfect hedges, the wealth that bought beauty but not redemption. Your father spent his whole life taking from people who couldn't fight back. He died rich, powerful, and completely alone. In that hospital room, do you know what he said to me? I wasted my life. I built an empire of sand. Vincent turned back to face her. You have a choice he never had, the choice to do right. The question is, are you brave enough? Natalie stood on shaking legs. She gathered the folder. The letter, all the evidence of her father's sins, and held them against her chest like armor. I don't know, she said honestly. I don't know what I am anymore. She walked to the door. Vincent followed, but slowly, like he was walking to his own execution. Thank you for keeping these, for telling me the truth. Make it right, Natalie. Fix what your father destroyed. It's the only way to escape his shadow. Natalie paused at the door. If I make it right, I'll lose everything. The company, the reputation, everything he built. Maybe. Vincent's voice was gentle now, almost kind. But you'll gain what he never had, what the ability to look in the mirror without hating the person you see. Natalie stepped out into the California night. The air was cold for December, carrying the smell of eucalyptus from the nearby tree. She stood beside her Mercedes, the folder of evidence heavy in her arms, and looked up at the stars. Somewhere in this city, Garrett Sullivan was sleeping. Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was lying awake thinking about the engine in his Mustang, about the wife he'd lost, about the life that had been stolen from him. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Fix what I destroyed. But how? How do you fix 15 years of stolen dreams? How do you give back a life that can never be returned? Natalie thought about Garrett's face that afternoon when he'd climbed out of the Mustang after showing them all what his engine could do. No triumph, just sadness, the face of a man who'd already lost everything that mattered. Her hands tightened on the folder. There was only one way she knew how to fix things. One language she understood. Money. Compensation. A fair deal to replace the unfair one her father had forced. She would buy the Prometheus engine from Garrett Sullivan. Offer him what he deserved, millions, tens of millions, whatever it took. That wasn't stealing. That was justice. Wasn't it? Natalie got in her car and drove back toward San Francisco, her father's confession on the passenger seat. Beside her, the weight of his sins pressing down on her chest. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to make the same mistake her father had made. She was about to try to buy something that had never been for sale. Natalie called Garrett into her office Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp. She'd spent the weekend rehearsing what she would say, how she would frame the offer, the exact words that would make him understand. This was different from what her mother had done. This was compensation, fairness. Justice delayed, but finally arriving. Her secretary buzzed when Garrett arrived. Send him in. The door opened and Garrett stepped through, still wearing his gray coveralls, standing near the entrance like he was ready to flee at any moment. His eyes swept the office, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Palo Alto. The walnut desk that cost more than he made in 6 months, the abstract art on the walls that meant nothing to anyone but cost everything. Sit down. Natalie gestured to the leather chair across from her desk. Garrett didn't move. I need to finish the second-floor restrooms. This won't take long, please. He lowered himself into the chair slowly, suspiciously, like it might be a trap. His hands rested on his knees, calloused and scarred from years of work that had nothing to do with the MIT degree or the Stanford Masters or the 12 years at NASA. Natalie had prepared a speech. Something about mutual benefit and fair market value and new partnerships. But sitting across from him now, looking at the quiet dignity in his face, the words dried up in her throat. I did some research on you. She decided to start with honesty. MIT, Stanford, NASA. You were a propulsion engineer. A good one from what I can tell. Garrett's expression didn't change. That was a long time ago. Not that long. 15 years isn't ancient history. You could have worked anywhere. SpaceX would have hired you in a heartbeat. Boeing, Lockheed. You could have started your own company. I needed a job. His voice was flat, giving her nothing. Natalie leaned forward. You're hiding something. That car of yours, that engine? I've heard a lot of engines in my life. I've never heard anything like that. For the first time, something flickered in Garrett's eyes. Caution, maybe. Fear. It's just an old car. Then you won't mind selling it to me. Natalie pulled out the checkbook she'd prepared, the Mont Blanc pen her father had given her for her 30th birthday. I'll give you $50,000 cash today. More than that car is worth by any measure. It's not for sale. 100,000. No. 200,000. Natalie's voice was rising now. Frustration bleeding through the professional veneer. $200,000 for a rusted piece of junk with an interesting engine. Nobody says no to that kind of money. Garrett stood up. I should get back to work. $500,000. The words came out sharp, desperate. $500,000 for the car, no questions asked. Garrett turned to face her fully. For a moment, the exhaustion in his eyes was replaced by something harder, something that had teeth. You really don't understand, do you? His voice was quiet, but it cut like a blade. You see that car and you think money. You think opportunity. You think asset. But that's not what it is. The pause stretched between them, heavy with 14 years of grief. That car is all I have left of my wife. Every time I turn that key, I hear her voice. Every mile I drive, I feel her beside me. You can't buy that. Not for $500,000, not for $500 million. Natalie felt something twist in her chest, an emotion she couldn't name. Shame, maybe, or the first stirrings of understanding. Everyone has a price, she said, but the conviction had leaked out of her voice. No, Garrett shook his head slowly. Everyone doesn't. Some things are sacred, some things matter more than money. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? You've never lost anything that couldn't be replaced. He walked to the door, then stopped without turning around. I know who your father was. I know what he did, what he built, and I know what he destroyed to build it. Natalie's blood went cold. What are you talking about? But Garrett was already gone, the door swinging shut behind him, leaving Natalie alone with her checkbook and her father's sins, and the terrible realization that money wasn't going to fix this. She spent the rest of the day trying to focus on quarterly reports and budget meetings, but her mind kept returning to Garrett's words. You've never lost anything that couldn't be replaced. The accusation stung because it was true. Her mother had left when Natalie was 12, but that had felt more like relief than loss. No more fighting, no more tension crackling through the house like electricity before a storm. Her father had died 7 years ago, but even that had been abstract, a CEO mourning another CEO, grief expressed through eulogies and estate planning. She'd never loved someone enough to be destroyed by losing them. At 6 p.m., Brad knocked on her door. You wanted an update on the engineering analysis. Natalie had forgotten she'd asked him to have the team examine the security footage of Garrett's engine. Come in. Brad sat down, looking uncomfortable. Patricia and her team spent the weekend reviewing the footage frame by frame. They built computer models based on what they could see, and they can't explain it. Brad shifted in his seat. The energy output doesn't match any known combustion process. The thermal signature is wrong. The sound frequency is impossible for a standard engine. Patricia used the word incomprehensible 3 times. Natalie stared at him. What does that mean? It means either Garrett Sullivan has violated the laws of thermodynamics or he's built something we don't understand. Probably the latter. Definitely the latter. But without access to the actual engine, I tried to buy it. The words came out bitter. Offered him $500,000. Brad's eyebrows shot up. And he said no. Smart man. Natalie's head snapped up. Excuse me. Brad met her gaze steadily. If I had technology worth billions, I wouldn't sell it for $500,000 either. Especially not to the daughter of the man who stole it from me in the first place. The room went very quiet. Natalie could hear her own breathing, could feel her pulse in her temples. What did you say? I did some more digging over the weekend. Brad's voice was careful now, walking on glass. Found some interesting patent filings from 2009. The Prometheus engine. Revolutionary thermal regenerative propulsion system. Inventors Garrett Sullivan and Catherine Sullivan. Assignee Brennan Aerospace Technologies. Natalie finished for him. I know. I found the same files, so you know your father took it from them. Brad wasn't asking a question. Acquired. Through a legal settlement, while Catherine Sullivan was dying of cancer, while they were drowning in medical bills. Brad's voice remained neutral, factual, which somehow made it worse. That's not acquisition, Natalie. That's extortion. Careful. The word came out cold, CEO cold, the voice she used to end arguments and careers. You're talking about my father. I'm talking about documented facts. Brad stood up. I'm also talking about the man mopping our floors who should be designing engines for NASA. The man you just tried to buy off like he's some kind of... He stopped himself, but the words hung in the air anyway. Get out. Natalie's voice was ice now. Get out of my office. Brad walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, I think you're better than this. better than him. But you have to choose to be. The door closed softly behind him. Natalie sat alone as the sun set over Palo Alto, turning the sky orange and purple and gold. Her office, with its expensive furniture and prestigious awards in perfect view, suddenly felt like a cage. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother, the first communication they'd had in 3 months. Saw the news about the quarterly earnings. Your father would be proud. Natalie stared at the message. Would he, or would he see what she was doing, trying to buy her way out of his mistakes and recognize himself in her? She picked up her phone and made a call she'd been putting off for 3 days. The voice that answered was crisp, professional. Brennan residence. It's Natalie. Is my mother available? A pause, then Helen Brennan's voice came on the line, distant and perfectly modulated as always. Natalie, to what do I owe the pleasure? I need to ask you something about Dad. Natalie's throat felt tight. Did you know about Garrett Sullivan, about what happened in 2009? The silence stretched for so long Natalie thought the call had dropped. Your father and I were separated by then. Helen's voice had gone carefully neutral. I knew very little about his business dealings. But you knew something. Another long pause. I knew he'd acquired some kind of engine technology. I knew there had been legal complications. I knew he was working longer hours than usual, drinking more. She stopped, and when she continued, her voice was softer, almost sad. I knew he was becoming someone I didn't recognize. Did you try to stop him? The laugh that came through the phone was bitter. I tried to stop your father from many things over 23 years of marriage, Natalie. I never succeeded once, that's why I left. Natalie closed her eyes. Did he ever express regret about Sullivan? About your father didn't do regret. Helen's voice was firm again. He did justification. He did rationalization. He did whatever mental gymnastics necessary to convince himself that what he wanted was the same as what was right. The words hit harder than Natalie expected. Isn't that what she'd been doing? Convincing herself that buying the Prometheus engine was justice, when it was really just acquisition with better PR. Why are you asking about this now? Helen's tone had shifted, concern creeping in. Natalie, what have you done? Nothing yet, but I'm about to. Be careful. Your father's legacy is complicated. You don't have to carry all of it. After they hung up, Natalie sat in the darkening office and made a decision. If Garrett wouldn't sell her the engine, she'd do what her father had done. She'd make sure he had no other option. She picked up the phone and called Brad back. I need you to do something for me. Keep your voice steady, CEO, steady. I need you to terminate Garrett Sullivan's employment, effective immediately. Brad's voice came through sharp with disbelief. What? Why? I don't need a reason. I'm the CEO. I can fire anyone I want. Natalie, this is insane. What are you? Security will escort him out tomorrow at noon. Make sure he doesn't take anything from the building. The line was quiet for a long moment. When Brad spoke again, his voice was cold. I'll handle it. But you should know this is exactly what your father would have done. I know. Natalie hung up before he could say anything else. She sat alone in her office as night fell completely, the city lights below like stars that had fallen to earth. She told herself she was protecting the company, protecting her father's legacy, protecting everything they'd built. She told herself Garrett would come around, eventually would realize he needed the money, would make the rational choice. She told herself a lot of things that night. None of them were true. Security escorted Garrett out of Brennan Aerospace at 11:47 the next morning. Natalie watched from her office window as he crossed the parking lot, flanked by 2 guards in dark suits who looked uncomfortable with the assignment. Garrett didn't argue, didn't make a scene, didn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. He just walked with quiet dignity to his Mustang, got in and turned the key. That sound again. Even from 12 floors up, even through reinforced glass, Natalie could hear it. That impossible, beautiful sound. Then he drove away, and Natalie was left with silence and the growing certainty that she'd just made a terrible mistake. The certainty became conviction 6 days later when her phone rang at 3 in the morning. It was Patricia Blackwell, her head of engineering, and she was watching television. "Turn on Channel 4. Patricia's voice was strange tight. "Right now." Natalie fumbled for the remote. The screen flickered to life, showing a press conference in progress. A small podium, simple backdrop, modest production values. At the center stood a man Natalie recognized instantly. Garrett Sullivan. Clean-shaven, now wearing a simple suit instead of gray coveralls. His eyes were clear and focused, the exhaustion replaced by something else. Purpose. Pleased to announce that Sullivan Dynamics has received $22 million in federal funding from the Department of Energy for the development of our clean energy propulsion system. Natalie sat up so fast she nearly dropped the remote. This technology, which my late wife, Dr. Catherine Sullivan, and I developed together over 15 years ago, has the potential to revolutionize not just aerospace, but transportation as a whole. The camera cut to show reporters leaning forward, some taking notes, others recording on phones. The Prometheus engine is a thermal regenerative system that recycles its own waste energy. In laboratory conditions, our prototype has run continuously for 72 hours without any external fuel source. We project a 90% reduction in aviation carbon emissions while simultaneously increasing efficiency and reducing operating costs. A reporter's hand shot up. "Mr. Sullivan, is it true that this technology was stolen from you 15 years ago?" Garrett paused. The room went silent except for the click of camera shutters. "There will be a time to discuss the history of this technology. Right now, I want to focus on the future, on what the Prometheus engine can do for the world. My wife believed this technology could help people. That's what matters. That's what I'm here to honor." Another reporter stood. "Sources inside Brennan Aerospace confirmed the company recently launched a secret effort to replicate your technology using stolen patents. Did CEO Natalie Brennan try to steal from you again?" Garrett's face remained impassive. "I have no comment on ongoing matters." The camera zoomed in on a banner behind the podium. "Sullivan Dynamics, lighting the future." Natalie muted the television. Her hands were shaking. $22 million in federal funding. A technology that could make her entire company obsolete. And Garrett Sullivan, the janitor she'd mocked and humiliated and fired, was now the face of the clean energy revolution. Her phone started ringing. Board members, investors, lawyers. The calls came faster than she could ignore them. By 9 a.m., Brennan Aerospace stock had dropped 18%. By noon, 3 major investors had requested emergency meetings. By 5 p.m., the board of directors had called for her resignation. Natalie sat in her office as the sun set over a city that suddenly felt hostile. Every news channel was running the story. Social media was exploding with hashtags: Justice for Catherine, Aurora Revolution, the Natalie Brennan scandal. And the worst part, the part that made Natalie want to scream, was that she deserved every bit of it. Every accusation was true. Her father had stolen the technology. She had tried to steal it again. She was exactly what the world was calling her: a privileged heir, who thought rules didn't apply to her. Brad knocked on her door around 7. "The board wants an answer by morning. They're prepared to vote you out if you don't resign voluntarily." Natalie didn't turn from the window. "What would you do?" "Honestly, I'd resign. Take a severance package. Disappear for a year or two until this blows over. You're young enough to reinvent yourself. Run away, you mean?" "Strategic retreat. There's a difference." Natalie finally turned to face him. "My father ran away from what he did. He buried it and pretended it never happened. And look where that got us. Look where it got me." Brad's expression softened slightly. "Natalie, you can't fix this. The damage is done. Sullivan has federal funding, public sympathy, and working technology. You have a failed replication effort and a PR nightmare. There's no path forward here. Maybe not for the company." Natalie's voice was quiet. "But maybe there's a path forward for me." Brad stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about doing something my father never did, something I've never done. She walked to her desk and picked up her car keys. I'm talking about telling the truth. Natalie, wait. Think about this. But she was already walking out the door, leaving Brad standing alone in her office, wondering if his boss had finally lost her mind. Natalie drove for 45 minutes before she found the address. Sullivan Dynamics operated out of a converted warehouse in Oakland, a modest building with simple signage and a parking lot that held maybe a dozen cars. Through the windows, she could see lights burning despite the late-hour engineers working machines humming. Progress being made. She parked her Mercedes beside the rusted Mustang and sat for a long moment, gathering courage that had always come easily when she was spending money or issuing orders but felt impossibly heavy now. Then she got out and walked to the front door. It was unlocked. She stepped inside and found herself in a workshop filled with engine components, diagnostic equipment, and the organized chaos of serious innovation. A dozen engineers looked up from their work, surprised to see a stranger in an Armani suit standing in their workspace. At the center of it all stood Garrett Sullivan, hands covered in grease, eyes fixed on Natalie with an expression she couldn't read. Everyone out. His voice was quiet but carried authority. The engineers hesitated. Boss, are you sure now? They filed past Natalie without a word, glancing back over their shoulders as they went. In 30 seconds, the workshop was empty except for the two of them. Garrett wiped his hands on a rag. How did you find this place? It's listed in the federal grant documentation. Public record. Natalie took a breath. I came to apologize. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. I read my father's files. Natalie's voice was steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. I know what he did to you, to Kate. I know how he stole your work and destroyed your careers. I know he threatened you with lawsuits you couldn't afford to fight. I know he took everything. Garrett's expression didn't change. And you think an apology fixes that? No. Nothing fixes it. Natalie forced herself to meet his eyes. I just needed you to know that I understand what my family took from you. Do you? Garrett's voice was soft but had an edge sharp enough to draw blood. Do you understand what it's like to watch your wife die knowing you can't afford better treatment because someone stole your life's work? Do you understand what it's like to mop floors for 4 years? Invisible to everyone, carrying a secret that could change the world? But having no way to share it, Natalie felt tears building behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. No, I don't. I'll never understand that. Garrett walked to a shelf and pulled down a thick binder, its pages yellowed with age and use. These are the complete Prometheus specifications. Everything Kate and I developed. Everything your father couldn't steal because we kept it in our heads. Natalie looked at the binder, confused. Why are you showing me this? I'm testing you. Garrett held the binder out to her. Take this home. Study it. If you can understand what Kate and I built, not just the mechanics, but the philosophy, the reasoning, the heart of it, then maybe you're capable of being different from your father. What if I can't? Then you'll prove you're exactly who I think you are, and this conversation will be the last we ever have. Natalie reached out slowly and took the binder. It was heavier than she expected, dense with knowledge and years of work and a love she'd never experienced. How long do I have? As long as it takes. Garrett turned back to his work. Close the door on your way out. Natalie walked out into the Oakland night, clutching the binder to her chest like it might save her life. Behind her, the lights of Sullivan Dynamics glowed warm against the darkness. In her hands, she held the key to redemption. She just didn't know yet if she was strong enough to use it. Natalie didn't go back to her penthouse. She couldn't face the empty rooms and expensive furniture, and the ghost of her father's approval. Instead, she drove to a 24-hour diner off Highway 101, ordered coffee she didn't drink, and opened the binder. The first page hit her like a physical blow. In elegant handwriting, Kate's handwriting, she realized were the words, "For Garrett, for our future, for everyone who needs light in the darkness." Natalie stared at those words for a long time. This wasn't just engineering. This was love. This was hope. This was everything her father had tried to destroy and failed. She turned the page and started reading. The mathematics were brutal. Natalie had studied engineering in college enough to understand most technical presentations that crossed her desk. But this was different. This was genius on a level she'd never encountered. Every equation built on the one before it. Every diagram contained layers of meaning she had to work to unpack. Kate and Garrett hadn't just designed an engine. They'd created a philosophy of energy, a new way of thinking about power and motion and sustainability. By 3 in the morning, Natalie's head was pounding. She'd filled half a legal pad with notes, most of them questions she couldn't answer. The waitress had refilled her coffee 6 times and was starting to give her concerned looks. Natalie didn't care. She kept reading. Around 5 a.m., she found a section labeled Core Principles in Garrett's handwriting. The Prometheus engine is not about creating energy from nothing. That's impossible. It's about respect. Respecting the energy that already exists, capturing what would otherwise be lost. Treating waste as opportunity. Kate always said the universe doesn't have a scarcity problem. It has a wisdom problem. We throw away more than we use. Prometheus changes that. Natalie read those words 3 times. Respecting the energy that already exists. She thought about her own life. The energy she'd wasted on appearances, on competition, on proving herself to people who didn't matter. The opportunities she'd thrown away because they didn't fit her image of success. The relationships she'd burned because maintaining them required effort she wasn't willing to give. She'd been living her whole life like a wasteful engine, losing more than she used. The sun was rising by the time she left the diner. She drove to a storage facility in Menlo Park, rented the largest unit available, and started making calls. "I need equipment." Her voice was hoarse from too much coffee and not enough sleep, but had a clarity she'd never heard in it before. "Machine tools, diagnostic systems, everything we used for the prototype attempts." Patricia Blackwell's voice came through, confused, concerned. "Natalie, the board is meeting in 3 hours. They're going to vote you out. You have to be there to defend yourself." "I know. I'm not going to the meeting. What? You have to." "No, I don't." Natalie's voice was calm now, certain in a way that felt both terrifying and right. "I'm done defending who I was. I'm going to become someone worth defending." She hung up before Patricia could argue. Over the next 6 hours, Natalie transformed the storage unit into a workshop. She maxed out 3 credit cards, buying parts and materials, downloading software, watching tutorial videos until her eyes burned. Her phone kept buzzing with news alerts. Board votes her out. Unanimously, stock continues to fall, investors flee, but she ignored it all. At 2 p.m. her phone rang. It was her mother. "I saw the news." Helen's voice was carefully neutral. "The board removed you." "I know. Are you all right?" Natalie looked around the storage unit, the half-assembled equipment, the technical manuals spread across a folding table. The sleeping bag in the corner because she couldn't imagine going home. "I will be. What are you going to do?" "Build something. For the first time in my life, I'm going to actually build something instead of just managing what someone else created." Helen was quiet for a long moment. "Your father never knew how to build, only how to take. I think that's what killed him in the end. The emptiness. I'm not going to let that happen to me." "Good." Then a pause. "I'm proud of you, Natalie. I should have said that more when you were growing up. I'm proud of you now." The call ended. Natalie stood alone in the storage unit, her mother's words echoing in the industrial space, and felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking. Opening. She turned back to the binder and kept reading. The first prototype took her 8 days to build. It was ugly, clumsy, the welds uneven and the connections imprecise. Her hands, soft from years of signing documents and shaking hands at cocktail parties, were blistered and cut. She'd burned herself twice with the soldering iron, hit her thumb with a hammer hard enough to turn the nail black, and spent one entire night crying in frustration when a circuit board she'd spent 12 hours assembling turned out to be wired backward. But she kept going. She slept on an air mattress in the corner of the storage unit. She ate takeout from the Chinese place down the street, sometimes forgetting to eat at all until hunger made her hands shake. She showered at a truck stop 3 blocks away. She talked to no one except the delivery drivers who brought her supplies and looked at her like she might be having some kind of breakdown. Maybe she was, but it felt more like a breakthrough. On day 8, she connected the power cell to her prototype and held her breath. The system activated. Energy began to flow through the circuits she'd painstakingly assembled. The regenerative loop engaged. For 4 seconds it worked. Then the energy cascade collapsed, the system overheated, and smoke started pouring from the thermal regulator. Natalie grabbed the fire extinguisher and put out the small blaze, then sat on the concrete floor staring at the smoking wreckage of her work. She didn't cry. She'd used up all her tears on day 5. Instead, she went back to the binder and read Kate's section on energy loop stabilization 3 more times. Found a notation she'd missed before, written in the margin in Kate's delicate script. The key is patience. The system needs time to find its rhythm. Don't force it. Guide it. Don't force it. Guide it. Natalie thought about how she'd lived her whole life. Forcing, demanding, taking. Never guiding. Never waiting. Never trusting anything to develop naturally. She rebuilt the prototype. Took her time. Paid attention to the rhythm Kate described. When she connected the power cell again, she didn't slam the switch. She eased it gently, like coaxing a frightened animal. The engine ran for 30 seconds, then 45, then 1 minute and 12 seconds before it failed. Progress. 3 weeks into her exile, Vincent Aldrich found her. He stood in the doorway of the storage unit, staring at the chaos inside, the scattered tools, the failed prototypes, the sleeping bag in the corner. The woman who used to run a $4 billion company, now wearing stained coveralls and a ponytail held together with a rubber band. My God. His voice was barely a whisper. What have you done to yourself? Natalie didn't look up from the circuit board she was soldering. I'm learning. Learning what? How to destroy your life. The board has frozen your assets pending investigation. Your accounts are locked. You're living in a storage unit. I'm not homeless. I'm working. Vincent walked closer, stepping carefully around the debris. He picked up Kate's binder, flipped through a few pages, set it down again. He gave you this. He's testing me. If I can build the engine, he'll know I'm serious about being different. And if you can't? Natalie finally looked up. Her eyes were bloodshot and exhausted, but there was something in them Vincent had never seen before. Something that looked almost like peace. Then I'll keep trying until I can. Vincent pulled up a folding chair and sat down with a heavy sigh. The board is talking about criminal charges. They're saying you orchestrated the cover-up of your father's theft, that you knew about the stolen patents for years. That's a lie. I didn't know until last month. I know that. But they need someone to blame. Your father's dead. You're not. Vincent pulled an envelope from his jacket. Before I came here, I liquidated some of my own holdings. Cash untraceable. It's not much, about $80,000, but it should keep you going for a while. Natalie stared at the envelope. Why would you do that? Because I failed your father once. I watched him do terrible things and said nothing. I won't make the same mistake with you. Vincent pressed the envelope into her hands. Be better than him, Natalie. That's all I ask. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I think Kate Sullivan would have liked you. The person you're becoming, I mean. Not the person you were. Then he was gone, leaving Natalie alone with her work and Kate's binder and the ghost of a woman she'd never met but was learning to admire more every day. The breakthrough came on day 37. Natalie had rebuilt the prototype 9 times. Each version got a little better, ran a little longer. She'd learned to read Kate's handwriting like a second language, to anticipate Garrett's logic, to understand the philosophy behind every design choice. And finally, something clicked. It wasn't a dramatic moment, no lightning bolt of inspiration, no sudden revelation, just a quiet understanding that had been building for weeks. Pieces falling into place one by one until the whole picture became clear. The Prometheus engine wasn't just about energy recapture, it was about harmony. Every component had to work with every other component, not against it. The system couldn't be forced or dominated. It had to be balanced, guided, respected. Just like Kate had written. Natalie made one final adjustment, a small change to the energy flow regulator, something she'd overlooked a dozen times before. She connected the power cell, held her breath, and activated the system. The engine started. Smooth, quiet, perfect. Natalie watched the diagnostic readouts, waiting for the collapse, waiting for the overheat warning, waiting for failure. 5 minutes passed. 10, 20. The energy loop held. The system recycled its own output, feeding back into itself, sustaining motion without external fuel. It wasn't perpetual, nothing was perpetual, but it was close. Closer than anything she'd ever seen. Natalie sat down on the concrete floor and cried. Not from exhaustion, though she was exhausted. Not from relief, though she was relieved. She cried because for the first time in her life, she had built something real, something true, something that mattered. And she cried because she understood now what Garrett had lost. The woman who had written those notes, who had dreamed these dreams, who had poured her heart into this impossible vision, she was gone. And all the money and power in the world couldn't bring her back. Natalie cried for Kate Sullivan, a woman she'd never known and could never thank. And somewhere in those tears, she found the person she wanted to become. She called Garrett the next morning. "It works, the engine. I built it. It's been running for 14 hours. Silence on the other end. "Did you hear me? I said I built it. I heard you." Garrett's voice was strange, guarded, but something else too. Something that might have been surprise. "You actually did it. I want to show you. I want you to see that I understand what you and Kate created. Not just the mechanics, the meaning, the philosophy." "Why does that matter to you?" Natalie gripped the phone tighter. "Because I need you to see that I'm not my father. I need someone, anyone, to believe that people can change, that I can change." More silence. "Then where are you?" She gave him the address. "I'll be there in 2 hours, don't touch anything." Garrett arrived at exactly the time he said he would. He walked into the storage unit without speaking, his eyes moving across the failed prototypes in the corner, the tools scattered across workbenches, the binder lying open to a page covered in Natalie's handwritten notes. Then he saw the engine, still running, that smooth, quiet hum filling the space. The diagnostic screens showed stable readings, the energy loop holding perfectly. Garrett walked closer. He examined every connection, every circuit, every component. He checked the readings, ran his own diagnostics, monitored the system for any sign of degradation. 15 minutes passed in silence. Finally, he turned to face Natalie. "How long did this take you?" 37 days. "And you built it alone?" "No help from anyone, no help. Just the binder and a lot of trial and error." Garrett looked back at the engine. "This configuration, the adjustment you made to the flow regulator, it's not in the binder." Natalie nodded. "I know. I figured it out on my own. It's based on something Kate wrote in the margins about harmony, about every component working with every other component. I realized the original design had a small imbalance in the feedback loop. The change corrects it." Garrett stared at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his expression showed something other than grief or anger. "You improved it. You actually improved our design." "I didn't mean to. I was just trying to make it work." "No." Garrett shook his head slowly. "Kate and I spent 7 years on this engine. We knew that imbalance was there, but we couldn't figure out how to fix it. And you found the answer in 37 days. He walked to the binder and picked it up, flipping through the pages, slowly looking at Natalie's notes and calculations and questions written in the margins alongside Kate's original text. She would have liked this. His voice was quiet now, almost gentle. Kate. She would have liked seeing her work continue, seeing someone else understand what we were trying to do. I wish I could have met her. So do I. Garrett set down the binder and turned to face Natalie fully. You know what she told me once, right before she died? She said the Prometheus engine wasn't just about energy. It was about faith. Faith that the universe gives us what we need if we're wise enough to accept it. Faith that waste can become wealth and loss can become gain. He paused, and in that pause, 14 years of grief and anger seemed to shift slightly, making room for something new. She said that someday the right person would find our work and carry it forward. Someone who understood that technology isn't about power. It's about service, about helping people. Natalie felt tears burning in her eyes again. I'm not sure I'm that person. No, you're not. Not yet. Garrett's voice was still gentle but honest. But you might be becoming her, and that's more than I ever expected. He reached out his hand. Natalie stared at it for a moment, not understanding. I need a partner. Sullivan Dynamics is growing faster than I can handle alone. The federal grant is just the beginning. We've got interest from airlines, from governments, from companies all over the world. I need someone who understands the technology, who believes in the mission, and who has the skills to navigate the business side of things. You want me to work with you? I want to give you a chance to prove who you are. Not your father's daughter, not the CEO who fired me, but the woman who spent 37 days in a storage unit destroying her hands and her reputation and her pride just to understand what two people built out of love. Natalie looked at his hand, rough, calloused, the hand of a man who had lost everything and refused to give up. She thought about her own hands, blistered now, scarred, transformed. She took his hand and shook it. I'll work harder than anyone you've ever met. I'll do whatever it takes to earn this. I know you will. Garrett released her hand and walked toward the door. Shut down the engine and pack your things. You start tomorrow. Natalie watched him go, then turned back to look at the engine, her engine, the thing she'd built with her own hands from Kate's vision and Garrett's knowledge and 37 days of failure and learning and transformation. The sun was setting outside the storage unit, throwing long shadows across the concrete floor. Tomorrow she would begin again, not as Robert Brennan's daughter, not as the disgraced CEO of Brennan Aerospace, as someone new, someone she was still learning to be. She walked to the engine and placed her hand on the housing, feeling the gentle vibration of the energy loop, the pulse of something her father had tried to destroy but couldn't. Because some things are bigger than greed, some things survive, some things fly. Natalie showed up at Sullivan Dynamics at 6 in the morning on her first day, 3 hours before anyone else arrived. She found Garrett already there, working on a prototype engine in the main bay, his hands moving with the precision that came from decades of practice. He looked up when she entered. You're early. I couldn't sleep. Natalie set down the coffee she'd brought, 2 cups, both black. Didn't know how you take it. Black is fine. Garrett wiped his hands and took the cup. There's an office in the back corner. Used to be a supply closet. You'll share it with David Mercer when we hire him as CFO. If we hire him. Natalie looked at the cramped space, metal desk, 2 folding chairs, a computer that probably ran Windows XP, a single window overlooking the parking lot. It was smaller than her bathroom had been in the penthouse. It's perfect. Garrett raised an eyebrow. You used to have a corner office with a view of the entire Bay Area. I used to be a lot of things. Natalie met his gaze steadily. What do you need me to do? For the next 3 months, Natalie learned what it meant to build something from nothing. She answered phones and filed paperwork and negotiated with suppliers who hung up when they heard the name Brennan. She learned to fix the ancient coffee maker when it broke, to unclog the toilet when the plumber was too expensive, to stay late reconciling spreadsheets because they couldn't afford an accountant. The other engineers didn't trust her at first. They'd all heard the stories, the CEO who mocked their boss, the heiress who tried to steal their technology. They watched her with suspicious eyes, waiting for her to fail. waiting for her to reveal that this whole redemption act was just another scheme. Natalie didn't blame them. She just kept working. One night, about 6 weeks in, she was alone in the workshop running diagnostics on a new prototype when Garrett appeared beside her. "It's midnight." His voice was gentle but firm. "Go home. I want to finish these tests. The Boeing meeting is in 3 days. If we don't have solid data, the tests can wait." Garrett pulled up a chair and sat down. "You've been here since 6 this morning. You've been here since 6 every morning for 6 weeks. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours?" Natalie tried to remember and couldn't. "I'm fine." "No, you're not. You're burning out, and then you'll be useless to everyone, including yourself." "I can't stop." Natalie's voice cracked despite her best efforts. "Every time I slow down, I think about everything I did, everything my father did. I think about how many years you lost because of us. How Kate died without ever seeing her work recognized. I can't just go home and watch television and pretend everything's okay." Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he started talking about Kate, about how when she was dying, when they both knew she only had a few weeks left, he'd wanted to spend every minute at her bedside. Hold her hand, tell her he loved her, make up for all the time they'd lost fighting for the patents, fighting against Robert Brennan, fighting to survive. "You know what she said?" Garrett's voice was soft now, filled with a grief that had aged like wine instead of fading. "She said if I sat there watching her die, I'd die too. Not physically, but inside. I'd carry that grief like a weight until it crushed me. She made me promise to take breaks, to eat meals, to sleep, to live." Natalie felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. She said guilt is just another form of selfishness. When we punish ourselves, we're making everything about us, our pain, our redemption, our story. But real change isn't about punishment. It's about service. About taking the energy we'd waste on guilt and using it to help someone else. "How do you do that?" Natalie whispered. "How do you stop feeling guilty for something that can never be fixed?" "You don't stop feeling it. You just learn to carry it differently. Like the engine, you don't eliminate the waste. You transform it. You turn it into something useful." Natalie looked at the prototype on the bench, the smooth curves of the housing, the precise arrangement of components. Kate's design improved by her own hands. "I don't know if I can do this." "Be the person you need me to be. The person Kate would have wanted." "Neither do I." Garrett stood up. "But I'm willing to find out." "Are you?" Natalie nodded. "Then go home. Get some sleep. Come back tomorrow ready to transform your waste into something useful." The Boeing meeting approached faster than Natalie expected. She spent the days leading up to it in a state of controlled panic, triple-checking every number, every projection, every technical specification. This wasn't just another business deal. This was Kate's dream meeting the real world. The night before, Natalie couldn't sleep. She sat in her small apartment, a modest one-bedroom in Oakland she'd rented with Vincent's money, and stared at a photograph she'd found in Kate's binder. Kate and Garrett on their wedding day, standing in Golden Gate Park, both of them young and brilliant and full of hope. Kate's smile was radiant, her eyes bright with dreams that would never fully come true. "I won't let them down," Natalie whispered to the photograph. "I promise." When the Boeing executives walked into Sullivan Dynamics the next morning, led by Catherine Wells, a woman whose silver hair and sharp eyes spoke of decades navigating corporate warfare, Natalie felt her stomach drop. Catherine's reputation preceded her: brilliant, ruthless, impossible to fool. "We've read your materials." Catherine's voice could have cut glass. "Impressive numbers, but I didn't fly from Seattle to look at PowerPoint slides. Show me something real." Natalie glanced at Garrett, who gave her the slightest nod. This was her moment, her test. "Follow me." She led the Boeing team outside to where the Mustang sat in the morning, still rusted, still battered, still impossibly precious. Catherine wrinkled her nose at the car. "This is your billion-dollar demonstration. This is the original." Natalie kept her voice steady, professional. "The first Prometheus engine ever built, 15 years old. Never needed major repair, never needed fuel. The Boeing engineers exchanged skeptical glances. Catherine's expression remained neutral, giving nothing away. Never needed fuel. Catherine's tone suggested she'd heard 1,000 lies in her career. That's quite a claim. Watch. Natalie climbed into the driver's seat while Garrett distributed tablets to the Boeing team, connecting them to diagnostic equipment. Real-time data feed. You'll see exactly what the engine does. Natalie turned the key. That sound, that perfect, impossible harmonic, filled the parking lot. The Boeing engineers stared at their tablets, watching data that shouldn't exist. Energy recycling through a closed loop, sustaining itself, growing stronger instead of weaker. One engineer, a man who looked like he'd designed engines for 30 years, whispered, "That violates the second law of thermodynamics." "No." Natalie's voice carried quiet authority. "It respects it. We're not creating energy. We're refusing to waste it." The demonstration lasted an hour. Natalie answered every technical question, walked them through every component, explained the philosophy Kate had embedded in the design. She didn't oversell, didn't exaggerate, just showed them the truth. When it was over, Catherine stood silent for a long moment, staring at the Mustang like it had just rewritten the rules of physics, which in a way it had. "I've been in aerospace for 32 years. Catherine's voice had lost its edge, replaced by something close to wonder. "I've seen every kind of con, every impossible promise, but this." She turned to Natalie, and for the first time her eyes showed something other than skepticism. "I know who you are, Ms. Brennan. I know what your father did. I know what you did. Half my board thinks we shouldn't be within 100 miles of you or this company." Natalie's chest tightened, but she held Catherine's gaze. "What do you think?" "I think technology doesn't care about our sins. I think this engine could change everything." And I think Catherine extended her hand. "Boeing is prepared to offer $10 billion over 5 years for exclusive partnership rights." The world tilted. $10 billion. More than her father's entire empire had been worth at its peak. "We'll need to discuss terms." Natalie's voice came out steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Of course." Catherine's grip was firm. "But understand this, there won't be a second chance. Fail us and we'll bury you so deep you'll never see daylight again." After the Boeing team left, Natalie and Garrett stood in the empty parking lot, the Mustang between them like a monument to everything they'd survived. $10 billion. Garrett's voice was quiet, almost disbelieving. Kate's dream just became worth more than most countries' GDP. "You should call her parents. Tell them." "I will." But first, Garrett turned to face her fully. "Thank you for making them see what we built, what Kate built. I didn't do anything special. You brought it to the world. That's all Kate ever wanted." The partnership announcement made global news within hours, but not everyone celebrated. 3 weeks later, a process server appeared at Sullivan Dynamics. Natalie opened the envelope to find a lawsuit from the Brennan Aerospace Board. $500 million in damages, a lifetime ban from aerospace. "They're trying to destroy us." Natalie's hands shook, holding the papers. "They can't compete, so they're going to drown us in legal fees." Garrett read through the lawsuit with that same calm expression he'd worn when Robert Brennan destroyed his life 15 years ago. "This is nothing new. Your father did the same to Kate and me. Tried to make us so afraid of the process that we'd surrender. And you couldn't fight because you had no money." Natalie's voice was bitter. "But we can fight now. Boeing Money Connections lawyers." "That's not the point." Garrett set down the papers. "You have connections, don't you? Journalists who've been investigating Brennan Aerospace. Lawyers who believe in whistleblowers. You want me to fight publicly. I want you to defend what we're building, not for your reputation, for the mission." Natalie thought about what that meant. If I go public, everything comes out. The theft, the cover-up, all of it. My mother, my brother, they'll be destroyed by association. I know. "Is that what you want, revenge on the Brennan family?" Garrett's expression softened. "Natalie, I spent 15 years fantasizing about revenge. But Kate was right about something else. Revenge is just another form of waste. It consumes energy better spent on creation. Then why fight? Because this isn't revenge. It's truth. Your father built an empire on lies. Every dollar Brennan Aerospace ever made came from what he stole from us. You can't undo that, but you can stop hiding from it. He walked to the window, looking out at the Mustang. Stand up and tell the world this is what happened, this is who my father was, and this is who I choose to be instead. That's not revenge, that's liberation. Natalie's press conference was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. She stood backstage in a simple black suit, no designer labels, no armor of wealth. Her hands were shaking. You don't have to do this. Garrett's presence beside her was steady. We could settle quietly. No. Natalie shook her head. I spent my whole life running from hard truths. That ends today. Are you scared? Terrified? Kate used to say that vulnerability is the price of transformation. If it doesn't scare you, it isn't real change. The stage manager appeared. Ms. Brennan, they're ready. Garrett squeezed her hand. Go make the right choice. The conference room was packed. Journalists, investors, lawyers, everyone who mattered in aerospace had come to see Natalie Brennan's reckoning. She walked to the podium, set down her prepared notes, and pushed them aside. I had a speech prepared. Her voice was steady, clear. 3 pages designed to minimize legal liability and protect what's left of my reputation. But I'm going to do something different. I'm going to tell you the truth. The room went silent. 15 years ago, my father, Robert Brennan, stole revolutionary technology from Garrett Sullivan and Dr. Catherine Sullivan. He used lawyers' threats and his wealth to take their patents, destroy their careers, and bury their work. The foundation of Brennan Aerospace was built on that theft. The room exploded, keyboards clattered, cameras flashed. I didn't know about this until recently, but ignorance isn't innocence. I benefited from what my father did. I built my career on his stolen success. And when I learned the truth, my first instinct was to do what he would have done and steal from Garrett Sullivan again. She paused, letting the admission settle. I was wrong, and I'm here to acknowledge that, apologize for it, and commit to a different path. For 45 minutes, Natalie laid out everything. Her father's theft, the destroyed lives, her own attempts to buy the technology, being fired the storage unit, the 37 days of building and failing and learning. I can't undo what my father did. I can't give Garrett back 15 years. I can't let Kate Sullivan see her dream fulfilled. But I can do what my father never did, tell the truth. She looked directly into the cameras. To everyone hurt by my father's actions, I'm sorry. To Garrett Sullivan, who gave me grace I didn't deserve, thank you. To Catherine Sullivan, who I never met, I promise your work will change the world, and everyone will know your name. The press conference went viral within hours. The Brennan Aerospace Board dropped their lawsuit 3 days later, too afraid of what discovery would reveal. But Natalie barely noticed. She went back to Sullivan Dynamics and kept working. The next 6 months were a blur of manufacturing challenges, regulatory battles, and technical refinements. Natalie negotiated with suppliers across 3 countries, testified before Congress, flew to factories in Germany and Japan. Through it all, she and Garrett developed a rhythm, a real partnership. They argued sometimes. Natalie pushed too hard. Garrett was too cautious, but they always found their way back to what mattered. One night, 8 months after Natalie joined Sullivan Dynamics, she got a call from Catherine Wells. We did it. Catherine's voice trembled with excitement. FAA approval. First flight next month. Natalie nearly dropped the phone. Garrett looked up from his work, saw her expression, walked over. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. We're approved. We're flying. Garrett walked to the Mustang and placed his hand on the hood. She would have loved this. His voice broke. Kate. She always dreamed of seeing Prometheus in the sky. Tell me about her. Natalie had asked before, but now she really wanted to know. Not the engineer, the person. Garrett talked for an hour. About meeting Kate at Stanford, both too stubborn to admit attraction. About their disastrous first date. About Kate working in the lab even while chemotherapy ravaged her body, refusing to give up. Her last words were about the energy flow regulator. Garrett's voice was barely a whisper. She was trying to tell me how to improve it, but she couldn't finish. And I spent 15 years wishing I'd understood what she meant. You did understand. Natalie took his hand. You finished it. We finished it. The first commercial flight took off from San Francisco International on a clear October morning. Natalie and Garrett watched from the observation deck as the Boeing 787 retrofitted with Prometheus engines taxied to the runway. The aircraft was painted deep blue with gold accents. On the tail, in letters visible from the observation deck, Catherine. You didn't have to do that. Garrett's eyes never left the plane. Yes, I did. This is her achievement. The world needs to know. The engine spooled up that perfect harmonic that had started everything. The aircraft accelerated down the runway, lifted off, climbed into the California sky. She's flying. Garrett was crying openly now. Kate's finally flying. Natalie put her arm around his shoulders as the plane disappeared into the clouds. Around them, the crowd erupted in cheers, but they stood apart from it all. Two people who had traveled an impossible distance to reach this moment. The success spread faster than anyone predicted. Within a year, 15 airlines licensed the technology. Within 2 years, Prometheus powered ships, trains, trucks. Within 3 years, the first Prometheus cars were affordable enough for ordinary families. Natalie established the Catherine Sullivan Foundation, funding scholarships for young engineers. Every year on the anniversary of Kate's death, she and Garrett visited the grave together. I never knew you, Natalie would say, but you saved me. Your vision, your belief that people could be better, you gave me a reason to change. 5 years after the first flight, the National Museum of American Innovation invited them to donate the Mustang for a permanent exhibit. Garrett agreed on one condition: Natalie had to be there for the unveiling. The ceremony was held on a November afternoon. The museum had recreated the Sullivan Dynamics workshop. At the center sat the 1973 Mustang Rust, preserved, looking exactly as it had on that day in the parking lot. Natalie gave a speech. She talked about Kate, about the Prometheus engine, about the power of persistence and love and second chances. I'm not the hero of this story, her voice carried across the crowd. I'm the villain who learned to be something else. I'm proof that the worst version of ourselves doesn't have to be the final version. After the ceremony, when the museum had quieted, Natalie and Garrett stood alone beside the Mustang. Do you remember the first time you heard this engine? Garrett asked. In the parking lot. I felt fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear that my whole life was built on a lie. She paused. That fear was a gift. It was the beginning of change. Garrett pulled something from his pocket. A key, old and worn. This is the original key. The one Kate used to start the engine the first time. I've carried it every day for 20 years. He held it out. I want you to have it. Garrett. I can't. Yes, you can. Kate would have wanted this. She believed in passing things forward. Natalie took the key with trembling hands. It was warm from Garrett's pocket, worn smooth by years of hope and grief and persistence. What am I supposed to do with it? Remember, every time you doubt yourself, hold this key. Remember what it started. Remember that worth isn't measured in shine or status, but in what you build, what you protect, and what you're willing to sacrifice to make things right. Natalie closed her fingers around the key. They stood together in the quiet museum, looking at the car that had carried them both through transformation. The rust was still there, the paint still faded. But inside that worn exterior was proof of something miraculous. That genius can survive theft. That love can outlast death. That the people who mock old cars and quiet janitors sometimes learn the hardest lesson of all, that worth isn't measured in appearance but in substance. The museum lights dimmed, but the story continued in every Prometheus aircraft crossing the sky, every clean energy vehicle on the road, every young engineer studying Kate's designs. Some revolutions start with a bang, others start with a whisper, and some, the ones that matter most, Start with a rusted car and impossible engine, and two people brave enough to believe that even the most broken things can be made to run again. The janitor got his justice. The CEO got her redemption. And the old car everyone laughed at became the machine that changed the world.